Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines, where I am very happy to be able to announce ngmodels' next new mold in 400 scale, which, as you can see, is the Boeing 7878, the smallest member of the Dreamliner family. Before I start this review, I want to thank ngmodels for having the trust in me to send me through these samples and get them out into the collectorate so you guys can see what it is they're making. It's been fabulous working with them and I really appreciate their support. And I think that it's really great that we get to see the models and the samples at this sort of stage and get a good look at them. And often NG make changes, though in this case, I don't think there's any actual need for modification. Before I take a slightly closer look and talk more about the 787, obviously please like and subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, and also follow me on Instagram at @YesToAirlines. Check out my Facebook group 400 Scale in detail, and obviously if you're not reading yesterdaysairlines.com, the website, then what are you doing? Because I post everything there, and that's the hub of all my material. And in fact, I announced this new mold sample at the website first before this video. Okay, cool. So as you can see, NG have sent me through this sample. It's quite late in the process for them, so they've got to the point where they've already printed on the windows and the doors and everything. And as you can also probably see, the engines are fully complete and I think have been taken off of one of their 787-9 releases, so they're effectively exactly the same. And in many respects, this is almost the same as their other 787 molds, which, as we know, are already pretty good. Obviously, also, the 8 is now the least important member of the family, so it's not too surprising that it's taken so long for NG to actually get this sample into production, because they started very much with the most popular member of the family, the 787-9, and that was NG's second ever new mold all the way back in 2018. So it's been a long time coming for them to release the 787-8. They did slip out of 10 a year or two ago, but the 8 is the very last member. And yeah, I can understand that. It's probably the least important member of the family now, although there have been 377 deliveries. So what I'm going to do is we'll get up close with this sample in a few minutes' time. But first off, I'm just going to take a quick look through the other molds that are available in 400 scale and talk a little about them and place this one in context. Now, I must say that the 787-8 has never been a particularly popular type for my collection. I actually only own 3 of that type of aircraft, and it just so happens they're all from different manufacturers and use different molds. So that's quite handy for this. However, it also does mean that I'm missing some molds, because there have been, I think, 6 different 787-8 molds in the past, and the newest one is from jcwings, and I don't actually own that one, which is a shame, but I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. What you can see here are the 3 that I own. We've got Hainan Airlines in the back left, which is a jcwings model, but not using jcwings new mold. In the back right, we've got a wittywings Apollo, China Southern, and then at the front we've got a Phoenix geminijets example. So I'll just briefly talk a little bit about these molds, which are these plus the new jcwings version are the real competition. There have been other molds that have been released, I think, but they've generally been hard to find or very poor quality. So these are the 3 most important molds plus the new jcwings version. So starting with the Hainan here, which is the jcwings model using the old Gemini mold. It's actually not a bad mold, but obviously it's obsolete nowadays because it's a seamed mold, and you can see that even though this version hides the seam very nicely, there is a seam there and underneath. So the mold is quite old, but this version is new enough that it's got the aerials. It was used by Gemini and JC quite a lot. It's also got solid core engine, so it's showing its age a little bit. It's okay. It's obviously not really a competitor now, and it's been replaced by the new jcwings mold, which is also used by Gemini, which shares many of the same features as this one, but has new engines, has a one-piece fuselage with slot-in wings and is a much nicer mold. And it's worth pointing out that that 2016 mold is, without a shadow of a doubt, the main competitor for this new NG8. It's an excellent mold, the new 2016 jcwings 787. Arguably, it's as good, maybe even slightly better than the NG 787s. It really is very much margin of error territory when you go about scoring these. And it's worth pointing out that I have done a detailed review way back when the NG 787s first came out. So you can check that out at yesterday's airlines.com, but fundamentally, as I say, they both scored very well. It was margin of error territory as to which was the best. Next up is the Phoenix mold. This mold actually dates all the way back from 2006, so it's the same age as that old Gemini version that we were just looking at. Obviously, it's been updated again with aerials. This mold is still in use by Phoenix now and again. Certainly the 9 gets a lot of use, the 8 gets a lot less, but they share the same principles. It's okay, it's not great. The wings have this huge curve on them, which is not accurate for aircraft on the ground. This version, again, is slightly older. It's got solid core engines, and I'm sure they've updated those now. But in other factors, it's inferior, even though it's got slot-in wings. I don't particularly rate it. This one also has some slightly weird cockpit windows. Hey, Phoenix and cockpit windows. What can you do? But it's okay. But I wouldn't be buying the Phoenix 787 nowadays. I'd always be going for the jcwings Gemini version or the ngmodels version. They are much better across the board. So this mold, even though it is still in use, it's not really a competitor from where I'm standing. It's 18 years old itself. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad mold, but it's inferior in detail to the other molds that are available for the 8 and the 9, I would say. So yeah, they're okay. And I've got a few Phoenix 787s, but they're not going to win any awards. Certainly not really up to 2022 standards. And last up of the molds that I own for a 787-8, probably the best, is the 2013 wittywings mold. This mold hasn't got a lot of usage. It's very hard to find, so it's not like you're going to have a lot of these in your collection or going to see a lot of these around. But nonetheless, it was a very nice mold. And Witty at the time were doing things that nobody else was. They didn't quite have aerials at this point in time, but they did have, even back then, hollow core engines, which is something nobody else was doing at this sort of time. And generally, this is actually a really nice mold, which didn't get a huge amount of use, but is really good. But as I say, unfortunately, as with most things Witty and Apollo related, it's a footnote in the history of 400 scale because they went bankrupt and in 2014. And so this mold didn't get a lot of use and has been hidden away because I think it's under the ownership of jcwings nowadays. So who knows where it is. It's never going to be seen ever again. So anyway, those are the competing molds. You've primarily got quite a lot of Phoenix on the market. Nowadays, you've got the new jcwings version. They're both still releasing 787-8s, though they get a lot less content than the 787-9 does. And that's partly because so many models have been released historically for the 8. So most everything's been made, but a lot of it has been made on what are quite old molds. It's amazing when you look back through, for example, and you look at an airline like American Airlines. For a 787-8, there are just 2, and they're both by Gemini, and they both use this old mold. And when you look back for other airlines, quite often you see that there's just a version using, say, the Phoenix mold, and perhaps one of the other inferior ones. So it's not the case that there's nothing for the new NG version to be making. And I can clearly still see a really strong business case for 787-8s in 400 scale, even though most of the models have been made previously. It simply is that a lot of the old models are, well, old. And so not necessarily up to the standards of today. They're using these older molds. They often don't have aerials or some of the other features which you would expect. They usually do not have the sort of printing detail that NG will produce, and generally the molds aren't quite as good. So I think there's decent potential for new 787-8s, though as you can see, not necessarily for my collection, because I only really collect Chinese 787s. When my collection gets to this kind of modernity, then it's mainly just Chinese airliners that are getting past the year 2000. So I wouldn't mind replacing this Gemin 787 myself. Actually, the China Southern and Hainan ones I've got, I'm quite happy with, so I'm not overly bothered about replacing those. This one still stands up rather nicely, even though it's got the wing seam. Doesn't bother me too much, and I probably wouldn't bother replacing it. And again, the China Southern version by Witty is actually very nice. So it's not the case you're going to be getting rid of all your old 787-8s, but there's definitely potential. And there are still new airlines taking delivery of 787-8s today. I think Air Astana has got some on order. So there will be new schemes too. So it's an interesting one, but I completely understand it. It's an opportunity for NG to really fill out their mold portfolio. Now, here is the new 787-8 sample with the other two variants from ngmodels. We've got an Air New Zealand 787-9 and we've got a British Airways 787-10, both by ngmodels. You can see that the molds look very similar, which is good because they're both really, really good molds. As I was just saying, this is one of the last gaps in the modern portfolio of airliners that NG hasn't already filled. They've got a complete 737 backlog for the next generation molds, at least. They've got the complete A320 family series, including the 318 up to the Neos. They've got all the A350 variants. They've got all the A330 classics, at least. And now they've got all the 787s. So they're really making a real dent in a lot of these airliner types. Now, personally, obviously, I'd like to see more classic types, but I completely understand that financially, these sort of molds sell super well amongst younger collectors and especially collectors in Asia. So I completely understand where NG is coming from by filling out their portfolio with gaps like this 787-8. But let's get into the 8 and just have a quick look around it. As I say, it shares almost all the features with this exceptional 787-10 and with the 787-9 down here. So there's not a lot for me to say that's new, but let's get in and have a closer look. Okay, so here is the 787 sample. As you can see, very much the 8, it's much shorter. It's, I think in real life, it's 56.72 meters long, a 787-8 compared to 62.81 meters for a 787-9. So there's about a 6 meter difference in terms of the fuselage length. Otherwise, from the outside, at least, there's very little to tell them apart. In fact, I don't think there's any substantial difference whatsoever. But you can see here that this mold shares the same details that the 9 did in terms of the tail, the wings, the stabilizers, the fuselage, undercarriage, nose. In fact, everything's the same. It's effectively the same, just shorter, which isn't a bad thing because, as I say, they're super nice models. So I'll just move around here so you can see all the way around. And then we'll take her off the stand and get a bit closer. So let's get her up here, and if I can get the camera to focus. There we go. Sorry, I've got a new iPad. It's got a slightly different UI to the old one. This is quite funky though. Okay, cool. So yes, really close-up view here of the nose and the undercarriage. As you can see, they pretty much match with what was on the 9. Looking really good. No real concerns here. And again, moving around to the portion of the fuselage in the center here, under the wings. Got the classic bar here that goes across. You've got stand hold, you've got these areas in relief, and you've got the undercarriage really nicely fitted. And really good engines, which, as I say, are effectively exactly the same engines that they've got on the other ones. And for their 787s, at least, they do have see-through engines, and not like their 777s. They've got see-through engines. I don't think they don't spin though. They're not spinning fan blades, which, you know, who gives a monkeys about that? It's a sort of worthless feature. But otherwise, really impressive. I'm really liking the look of this. It could convince me that maybe I should be acquiring a few more 787s. And certainly, as I was saying, for airlines like American Airlines, British Airways, there's some really good potential to be releasing more 787-8s because they're not particularly well served on the market, I would say. So I would presume that, considering this mold is effectively finished, I can't see any real reasons to modify it or change it, and that it's already printed up here with the template for the doors and the windows that I would expect this to be off into production, you know, pretty soon, and see some announcements for the 8 in the very near future. And it really does, you know, give NG kind of a quandary now. They've got so many molds that they can use that some are just not getting the sort of usage I'd like to see. Like, we've barely seen the TU1.4, for example, since that mold come out. We've only been the one release. But we've recently had a spurt of 737-600s, and obviously the 737s and A330s and A350s are getting a lot of good usage. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, where NG go with this mold, and whether they focus primarily on the big airlines like American, like British Airways. I think they probably will, but hopefully they will also capture some of the smaller operators like Royal Brunei, Royal Americ, Latam, those kind of airlines as well, and give a nice range of operators and models. So it's another good mold. It's not a 747, but NG tell me they're coming. So just be patient, everyone. Eventually they will appear. But for now, a nice addition to the NG Models mold catalogue. Obviously, it's going to sell. I don't see any problem with people wanting to buy 787s anytime soon. And it's looking really nice. So thanks very much, NG. Another good mold addition to your family of molds, and I'm sure there'll be some nice models coming. Okay guys, well that's it from me today. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned to yesterday's airlines to see what else NG have in store over the coming months, as well as other manufacturers, because I report on everyone. And despite what some people say, I try to be as unbiased as I can. So anyway, see you later guys. Thanks very much.